Alright, so today we got the Mark II. Now I remember when this first came out and a lot of us went out and copped one, smiling from ear to ear when we seen the video of somebody was still with the Mark I, stuck with them orange pads, and we knew we got colors and everything. But, you know, over time, maybe it ended up just kind of in your closet collecting dust or whatever. Well, hopefully this demonstration today will show you that you could take it out the closet, get your duster, dust it off, and hook it up with FL Studio and bring it back to life. All right. Start off with this control button right here. We can see that the light is on. So this button controls pad sensitivity. When it's on, we have more sensitive pads, so they respond a little bit better to the touch. We can also turn it off. And we can see in the hint panel that we go back to default pad sensitivity. I like to keep it on, especially if I'm playing like a melodic instrument, but you could also turn it off if you're hitting the pads a little harder and playing drums or something. When it's on, you lose access to aftertouch, but to get aftertouch back, you can turn it off. All right, so we have the step button next to it, which will pull up the channel rack and hide it. If you hold select and press step, this will show your currently selected plugin, and you can do that again to hide it. We have the browse button to open the browser and close it. And if we're in the browser, we can use the sampling button to preview the selected sample. So let's go find a sample. These two buttons right here are reserved for changing your knob pages. We have this all button, which will turn on and off all the lights. So that's just a matter of preference. And then we have this auto button that will close any window that is open. So if I open the channel rack, for instance, I can close that with the auto button. All right, let's move on to this section right here, starting with this enter button, which will show and hide the playlist. And then we'll move on to this encoder, which will allow us to navigate the browser, but the browser has to be focused first. As you can see, it's not doing anything until we press browse to focus the browser. And now we can navigate the browser. To go into a folder, we can push the encoder. And once we're in a folder, we can ascend back out by holding select and turning the encoder left. Now that's a convenient shortcut because while we're in a folder, we can really just keep turning the encoder left to get back out, but it's nice to have the shortcut. We can use these arrows here to navigate the browser tabs. And if we want to load a sample into the channel rack, we would push the encoder. So let's find a sample. Right now, if I push this encoder, it'll replace my currently selected channel, and I don't want to do that. So I'll use select and enter to open the menu, turn the encoder to select open a new channel, and then push the encoder to load the sample into a new channel. We have the sampler here that pops up, and we can use the escape shortcut to get rid of that. And that is select and push the encoder. If we open the menu for an item by holding select and enter, and then we change our minds, we can get out of the menu by holding select and pushing the encoder. So that should be it for navigating the browser, and we'll move on to these three buttons right here. So we'll start with this volume button, which we can hold down and turn the encoder to control the volume for the currently selected channel. So you can see that changing right here in increments of 5% according to the hint panel. And then we have swing here, so I'll pull that up so we can see it right here. We can control that by holding the swing button down and turning the encoder. And then we have the tempo button to control our tempo. We hold the tempo button down and turn the encoder, and we can change our tempo in increments of 1 beat per minute. We'll get back to this note repeat button a little bit later. All right, let's take a look at these first three knobs here, starting with this one, which allows us to control our mixer track. So as I turn it, we have the mixer that pops up, and we can select the track. And then holding select and turning that knob controls which pattern we're on, so we can see that up top. And then this second knob here controls the volume for the currently selected mixer track. So let's go to 1, for instance, and we can turn that up and down. And it snaps to the default position, which is 100% or 0 dB. Then we have this third knob here for pan, and holding select and turning this knob will control stereo separation. Now these controls are pretty cool because you can't do this with a mouse. Anyway, let's look at this column of buttons here. We have the scene button, which will show and hide the piano roll. We have the pattern button to switch between song and pattern mode, which you can see up here. We have this pad mode button, which is pretty complex, so we'll come back to it a little bit later. But we have this navigate button, which allows us to insert markers into the playlist. So I'll open up the playlist here, and we'll hold select and press navigate to insert a marker. And we can keep doing that wherever we want. And then to navigate these markers, we would hold navigate and turn the encoder. And we can get rid of the markers, again, by holding select and navigate. All right, we have this duplicate button, which essentially copies and pastes. So let's open up the piano roll, put a couple notes in there, press duplicate, and we have the notes duplicated. All right, we've seen the select button already. It allows us to access secondary functions of the other controls. And then we have this solo button, which will solo the currently selected track. So you can see that the master track here is soloed, and press it again to unsolo. And then mute works the same way. We can mute and unmute that track. Now, if we hold select and press mute, we get a panic button, which will send a MIDI note off message to every single note in every single channel. So that's useful for if you ever have like notes that just won't stop playing. All right, let's talk about this fixed velocity knob right here. So first of all, if I hit a pad, we can look at the hint panel to see the velocity that I'm hitting it at. So we just had 92 there, 111 right there, and 126 right there. And what I noticed with this Mark II generation is that I can never get to the full 127 velocity. I don't know what that's about because I haven't had that problem with the Mark IIIs. So yeah, I even elbow dropped this pad right here to see if I could get it to 127, and I couldn't. But luckily we have this fixed velocity knob that will send the exact velocity that you tell it to. So if I go ahead and turn this all the way up to 127, I can press this pad and get my full velocity. So that's what this knob is for. When it's all the way down to 0, then we can see the hint panel that fixed velocity is off, and the pads will play at the velocity that you hit them at, except for 127 apparently on the Mark IIs. All right, now we're at my favorite part of the demo, which is pad modes. We have 5 different pad modes, and we start off in this default pad mode where we get to select the different instruments in our channel rack just by pressing the pad that corresponds to that instrument. So if I press this first pad, I get my first instrument, and I can also preview the sound that way. I can use the second pad to get my second instrument, the third pad for my third instrument, and we have 16 pads, so that's 16 instruments. And if we want to use more than 16 instruments, we simply switch our group. So if I go to group B and I hit this first pad, that will correspond to my 17th instrument all the way up to 32 here. And we can keep doing that with these groups all the way to group H, which means that we can access 8 times 16 instruments, whatever that equals. Going back to group A, we'll start to explore some of our other pad modes now by hitting this pad mode button. We hit it once and that takes us into keyboard mode. We can see that the pads are blue and the group button is also blue. I can hit this pad mode button again to take us into chords mode. And then if I hit it again, we go into step mode. Here I get to control the steps in the step sequencer, just like that. And I can clear these pads in the step sequencer and they'll also clear on the machine. All right, now we have our last mode, which is called Omni Preview mode, and we get there by holding select and pressing pad mode. The pads turn yellow, or at least they're supposed to look yellow. On the camera, they kind of don't, but either way, to get this mode to work correctly, we go to Options, MIDI Settings, and we make sure that this Omni Preview MIDI channel is on 16, and we only have to do that once. Now, this mode is very similar to the default mode. We can listen to our different instruments. But the difference here is that we're not actually selecting the instrument now. It stays on our instrument selection. Now we can actually play the different instruments simultaneously in this mode. So let's go back to keyboard mode here and talk about scales. Right now we're on the default scale, which is chromatic. You know what? Let me change the instrument to something that's, I guess, a bit more audible. So I'll go back to pad mode and select my first one, and then let's go back to keyboard mode. So we have our chromatic scale. All right, and we have a bunch of different scales available. Really, we have all the scales that are available in Maschine software, and we can change our scale by using this knob right here. So if I turn it once, we get our major scale, which we can see in the hint panel there. So this is what it sounds like. We can turn it again to switch to a minor scale. Again, takes us to our harmonic minor. And we just keep changing this to whatever scale we want. And if you notice, we get some different highlighting of the pads every time we change the scale. And those highlighted pads signify the root note of the scale that we're in. So since we're in the key of C right now, we have a C right here, 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 and here, all at different octaves. All right, so all these scales that we just looked at was just in our first group of scales. So we can use these group buttons to switch to different groups of scales. So if I go to B now, we have some more options in scales. All right, some stuff I can't pronounce. All right, so we can listen to some of these. All right, so we have a bunch of different scales here, and we have all these groups to access all those scales, and then we have this knob to access the different scales in each group. So I'm just gonna keep it simple, and I think Ionian is like major, right? Yeah. Anyway, I'll be safe and put it to just major. All right. All right, so we're in the major scale now. Let's take a look at chord mode. I'll press this pad mode button. We're in chord mode, and this mode also responds to the selected scale. So let's listen to that. If I change my scale to a minor, we get the minor scale in chords mode. Now, the chords that we're listening to can be configured up here. Right now we have it on 1 and 3, so we hear the first and the third note of our scale making up our chord. If I change it to 1-5, we can listen to that. 1-3-5, 1-3-5-7, all right, 1-4-5. These kind of sound weird to me, but it really depends on what scale you're in for them to sound, I guess, musical. 1-4-7. Octave. All right, and then we have this special mode here called chord set mode. If I press it, my pads change to a different color. And now we have chord sets. So these are built in, we have a whole library of different chord sets. And again, we can use these groups to select different groups of chord sets. But before doing that, we can actually explore different chord sets within the group that we're already in. And to change the chord set, we would hold the select button here and turn this knob. And we can see in the hint panel that our chord set is changing. And we can go all the way up to 16. So if you do the math, that's a ton of chord sets. All right, 16 in the first group, and then just multiply that by 8. A couple of them have a little bit less than 16, but you get up to 16 in each group. So I'll just go ahead, choose a random group, 6, I guess, and choose a random chord set and see if it sounds good or not. Yeah, I'm just playing random stuff here, but hopefully you could see that there's a lot of potential here. And if somehow there's not a chord in here that you're looking for, you can actually go ahead and add your own custom chords by editing the file called custom.py. So I'll open that in a little bit and show you how that's done. But for now, we'll go ahead and continue exploring these chords. So if I go back to one of these groups here from 1-3 all the way to octave, that's not our special chord set mode. I can actually fine tune these chords a bit further by changing the position. So let me put this on. I usually like to use 1, 3, 5, 7 to demo this, and we'll listen to a random chord. We can change the position of that chord, or in other words, invert that chord by using this knob. And we can see that now we're in chord position 1 if we look in the hint panel. So this is a good way to get some variation in your chords. You're able to play the same exact chord, but just inverted. All right, now we have octave here and semitone. So octave will allow you to go up and down octaves. I want to be careful here because I think there may be some special key triggers in this instrument. So we also have semitone, and we can go up and down. All right, and we also have these buttons down here to change octave, and you can use the left button to octave down and the right button to octave up, and when it's lit up here, it'll show you if you're above or below octave 0. So here we can see that we're above octave 0 because the right button is lit up here. So that's that, and at 0 we have this. All right, so once you legally acquire this script, this integration, you'll see a folder with files that looks like this. And right now we're interested in custom.py. So we open that up, and this is where we can define our custom scales up here and our custom chord sets down here. So I'm going to go ahead and add a chord right in here between these brackets. I think I like the face chord, so I'm going to do F, A, C, E. Now you also need to specify the octave, so let's do F5, I guess A6. Now, you know what, let's go down one. F4, A5, C5, E5. All right, we'll save this file, and then we can go back into FL Studio, go to View, go to Script Output. Let's see, I got 2 machines plugged in here. I want the MK2, so I'm going to reload this script. All right, and now our custom chord will be in there. So now we just got to find it. So we use pad mode to go to chords mode, and then we'll use this chord set button here to go to the chord set mode, and then we'll try our new chord out. Well, not yet. Actually, we have to go to the last bank, because the last group here, H, this is where all of your custom chord sets will be. All right. So right now we'll be on chord set 1. And if you had gone in this file and filled out custom chord set 2, then in FL Studio, you can come in here and press select and turn this knob to go to chord set 2, but we don't have that filled out. So we'll stick to 1 and we'll play the 1 chord that we just made. Oh, that's not, that's not that great. Let me put it to this. So that's our face chord. Now these are silent because we didn't fill them in, but we made our first custom chord right there. Notes so that these pads line up with the pads in FPC. And I've done that already for pads 1 through 16 and 17 through 32. And then they just repeat. All right. So the custom scales, you can find them as the last scale in each group. So if we go back here into FL Studio, and we're in group A right now, if I change this knob here all the way to 16, we have our custom. All right. If I go to B now, I can, when I have this at 16, we have another custom. So the last, or the 16th scale in each group is your custom scale. All right. So you'll have 8 of those scales, and there are these 8 right here. All right. So you can change these up, and let's see how these notes are defined. You have to be careful when you're entering these in here, because if you enter it incorrectly, then the script won't run. So probably a good idea to make a backup before you start editing anything. So these notes are defined in notes.py, and you can see all the possible notes in here. For the actual note, they must be capitalized. The sharp, the S for the sharp is lowercase, and then the B for the flat is also lowercase. So as long as you stick to that, you should be good. Let's combine some of these features and see what we get. All right, let's look at this transport section right here. We can press play to play, restart to restart, grid to turn on the metronome, press it again to turn it off, press play to stop, press record to arm recording, press it again to take that off. We can hold select and press record to enable count in. Do the same to disable it. Let's go into the piano roll here and put some notes in, just so we can erase them with this erase button. Oops, I don't want to really erase it. Let's undo that. Select first pad, undo. Wait, actually I do want to do that. Select second pad, redo. and I'm just indecisive. I really need to undo that again so that I can demonstrate quantize. So I undo and select to the 5th pad to quantize. Well, they were already quantized, so let's go ahead and just kind of mess that up for demonstration purposes. Change the grid, let's say to beat, and then we can use select and the 5th pad to quantize. All right. Now I'm going to show you how to change pad colors. This applies to pad mode, which we're currently in, and also Omni Preview mode. So you hold the navigate button here and you press the pad that you want to change the color of, and you can cycle through the various colors. And we can have a whole bunch of different colors here. And this is useful for if you want to group similar instruments or otherwise identify your pads, and or maybe you just want to see different colors. All right, so we can also latch in a particular note to a pad, so assign a note to a pad, and we do that by first using semitone or octave or both to change to the note that we want. By default, we're at C5. So I can go up to C sharp, for instance, and then hold note repeat and the pad. And now my C sharp note is latched in, and regardless of what my semitone or octave is at, this pad will always play C sharp. All right. So to clear that assignment, we hold note repeat and press the pad. The assignment is clear, and now it goes back to responding to whatever the semitone and octave is set at. So we'll put that back to C, and we have our C5 again. All right, so the last thing to show here is you have a shortcut, which is select and sampling, to open Edison on the currently selected track. That should be it. Have fun.